Okay, everyone, Wednesday morning, and yeehaw, the international football is over. I don't know if that means the international break is over. Where do you guys draw the line? Is it international break until Celtic kick off on Saturday? Is it Brendan Rodgers' press conference? Is it now? Where do you draw the line with the break being over? As early as possible, probably.
About 10:15 last night when Scotland when the full time whistle went. I was like, right, Scotland have stopped playing. It's now time to focus on Celtic once again. Great result for Scotland last night. It's a result that I think that they could have actually won the game 2 years ago. I think if they had all those players that were flying at that point, your Kieran Tierney's, your Scott McTominay's, Andrew Robertson's, etc., John McGinn, but against a really good squad of individuals in Portugal, household names from defence to attack. It was a good draw for Scotland. They had their chances, Portugal had their chances, but it was actually quite an enjoyable nothing each game, which is something that you can't say too often. So it was a good game at Hampden last night.
I saw Tony Ralston going for a handshake with you-know-who at full time, and Ronaldo was in one of his typical strops. And I think Ralston got a bit of a half-hearted handshake or hand slap or whatever they call it, Tony. But he played all right by all accounts, Ralston.
Yes, he was very good until a particular Portuguese substitute came on and started. Yeah. I think Charlie McGrew said at one time he screwed him into the deck. He got screwed Anthony Ralston into the deck. But yeah, he's not the first and last defender. The Portugal winger will do that too. So yeah, listen, you've got to give them credit where they deserve it. It was a decent point. They actually played pretty well on the night. Both sides had chances to win, and also if Scotland had been a bit braver, they could have gone and won the contest. Don't know what Shea Adams is doing with a header. Strikers should always try and score with headers. He was unselfish, possibly too unselfish, but hey, them's the breaks. But yeah, that's the first point on the board for Scotland, see what happens. But I'm like Ryan, as soon as the game was finished, I was like, right, let's talk about Celtic. You know what I mean? I was just like, let's focus on Saturday. So yeah, the international break always ends for me as soon as that final whistle is blown and the game, whenever it is in midweek. So yeah, I'm desperate now for the club fix. As you said earlier in the week, the most hyped game ever, isn't it? The most talked about game over a period of days, but it is what it is, and we are where we are. Roll on Saturday.
Yeah, that seems to be the general consensus. Brian can't wait for Saturday. Just got a wee freebie ticket. So good stuff, Brian. Enjoy the game. Nothing better than a wee freebie. Well, there is Celtic actually turning up and performing. Hazel, please, the international break's over. Now for the important stuff. Bring on the Aberdeen is Gordon's message. Robert saying, better hurry up with the pod, boys. There's another international break in 7 minutes. Yeah, it sometimes feels like that at this stage of the season. Just to round off the international chat, what else did we have last night? We had Kasper Schmeichel. Was that last night? Played in a 2-2 draw, Denmark, Switzerland. Faultless for the two Switzerland goals. One was a penalty, one was a shot from close distance that he couldn't really do much about. We had Austin Trusty coming on for the last 10 minutes, was it, for the US?
Yes,
they lost to Mexico. I think that was a friendly, so he got a little bit of game time, more than Real Hatate and Dyson Maida. No game time for them. Was that last night as well? I feel like I'm going crazy. I feel that was 2 nights ago.
It was. Is it not in the afternoon? But over here, it would have been the afternoon. It's a weird.
Because of the 24 hours ago, wasn't it? It wasn't Monday or anything.
25 to 12 kick-off it was over here. So
did you sit and watch that, Tony?
No, I didn't. I was writing a piece about Luke McCowan, which is on the website today for your delectation. So I did that. I called him the Cobra that could be unleashed against Aberdeen. He's just waiting to be unleashed and given his first start. I'm not saying he will start, but I'm just kind of making a case for him in terms of would the manager be would the manager maybe want him to start or give him the nod. So I've just sort of outlined the good things about Luke McCowan and how it wouldn't phase him type thing. So as I say, I'm not saying he will start before everybody says he will start. I'm just making a wee case for him. And yeah, people seem to be enjoying it on the pod. I'll just put it into the group chat right now if you want to have a wee read at that. Carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to ask him what's the What's the feeling about that third midfield place for Saturday between Hatate, Bernardo, and McCowan? It's an interesting one, given that Bernardo's been away. He played, and did he play last night? Because they had
he
another
did.
game.
Faroe Islands and Andorra, I'm sure he played.
He played in both of the games.
Yeah, because he's the captain of the under-21s, so he scored
But
that
they'd already
incredible goal
qualified, so I wondered if they might rest him. But he played the full. I don't actually see him there. Well, he came on 15 minutes. He came on as a 75th minute sub. Bernardo, so he should be fairly rested. But what do you think, McCowan, Bernardo, Hatate, Ryan?
If it was me and it was up to me, then I would want Paulo Bernardo to play the game. I'm very much on the Paulo Bernardo boat. His side of things, I like what he brings to the team. I've made it no secret that I enjoy his industry. I enjoy what he brings off the ball, what he brings on the ball, the fact that he's got a good shot outside of the box as well. He's already shown that on 2 occasions against Falkirk and St Johnstone, respectively. So, yeah, for me, he's a starter for me at the moment. I think that midfield three of McGregor, Bernardo and Engels would be my first choice. But and it's no slight on Luke McCowan. I would like to see him start a game as well. I know he started against Sligo Rovers and he was arguably Celtic's best player. Wasn't a great game by all accounts, but he showed his stuff.
Was he good in that game?
Yeah, he was one of the players that impressed. A couple of youngsters impressed. Palmer got his hat-trick, but it was a very stereotypical Palmer performance, you could say. But Luke McCowan was just quite a cool, calm and collected customer. And yeah, he just went about and did his business. So I wouldn't mind him starting, but I think that Rodgers will go for Paulo Bernardo out of the players that he's got. He's got 3 to choose from between him, Hatate, and Luke McCowan, as well as Bernardo, obviously. So, and I think Engels and McGregor are basically locks to go into the starting lineup at the weekend. So, yeah, it's a good position for the manager to be in because they've got options now in that midfield and they can change it about. And he was also talking about the fact that, I think he said it about a week ago, that he had energy to come off the bench in the likes of McCowan and Bernardo. Regardless of who's on the bench, they've still got a part to play later on in the game. It could be a tight game against Aberdeen. It could be one of these games that could go down to the wire. And if you've got players like McCowan, Hatate, maybe even Engels if he's on the bench, although I don't see that happening, then you've got them to bring on and make a difference. So it's that strength and depth, which hasn't always been there for Celtic in recent years, but now they've got loads of players that they can call upon.
Are you team McCowan then, Tony? Or would you start McCowan in your team?
I wrote in the piece that conventional wisdom says it will probably be McGregor, Bernardo and Engels. But I was just making the point that, McCowan's bursting for a start. The manager labelled him outstanding. I'm just sort of throwing it out there, and it's a good debate at the minute. For me, McCowan is more liable to come on before Hatate, and he's more liable to start than Hatate at this minute in time. There's no slight on Hatate. I just think McCowan's actually showing more, and he will eventually get his first start. But I'm just sort of saying that the manager, McCowan understands the gravity of this fixture coming on Saturday. He's been Dundee's captain, and he's got real leadership qualities there. And as much as anything else, he's pretty cool and composed in the ball. He doesn't waste a lot of ball when he gets it. And everything else, he'll get stuck in. Aberdeen will come to show you how good they are, or think how good they are under Jimmy Tilleen. So you'll need to match them in every department. And I'm not saying the manager will choose McCowan, but I just think there's something in McCowan that he might relish a game like this, of this magnitude, if he's given the nod. But as I say, I'm not saying he'll definitely start. I'm just saying it's an option for the manager, and why. And I'm outlining reasons why. He might say to him, "Do you know what? You've done enough for me to justify your selection." But as I say, I've gone along the conventional wisdom as well. I think most people would say that the strongest midfield at this minute is Engels, Bernardo and McGregor. I'm just questioning that, and I'm asking the question, if it wasn't those three, and allowing for travel and Paulo Bernardo featuring in under-21 games, could you trust McCowan? And I think you could trust McCowan with a game of that magnitude on Saturday. He's done nothing wrong, and every time he's came on, he's impressed me greatly. So I just think the Celtic supporters are bursting to see more of him. But I think the manager wouldn't hesitate to throw him on like he did in Dingwall if it wasn't going Celtic's way, and he would even do it earlier if needed.
Yeah, and I think the point I would make before I give who I would play is that I think any of those 5 players starting in midfield you'd be relatively content with. I think they'd all offer something. For me, it's Rio Hatate. Just to complete the circle, I would go with Hatate on Saturday. I think he's got the ability to find those gaps against Aberdeen. I think someone said previously that he's had some really good games at home to Aberdeen in the past, and I think you have to consider stuff like that. I know he's not been consistent this season, Hatate, but he's not been the dud that a lot of people are making out. I think there's a lot of stuff being said about Hatate that I think is unfair. Hatate's put in some good performances for us this season. Bratislava, St Mirren away. There's been other games as well where he's been, half decent. And there's been games that he's struggled, and I'm not going to shy away from that. Hearts at home, I thought he really struggled. But Bernardo's been good as well in the main, but Bernardo's had moments as well that he's not been great, and even Engels has had a couple of games recently where he's not been great. So for me, it's not a ridiculous shout. I actually think Rodgers will start Hatate on Saturday. That's not just that I would start him. I think when the team comes out, and this could age horrendously, I think when the team comes out, it will be McGregor, Engels, Hatate. Discuss.
I think it's a great debate, isn't it?
Yeah, it's strong regardless of who you play. It's not as if you're bringing in a lesser player. I think every player can contribute to Celtic in different ways. Even Luke McCowan. I say that even Luke McCowan, but he's still a really good player for Celtic. An absolute bargain already. Tony's piece today says he's played 67 minutes for Celtic so far, which is quite an apt number to be sitting at the moment. Hopefully he gets a couple more minutes or quite a few more minutes at the weekend. I'd like to see him. I'd like Celtic to have the game done within 60 minutes. Then you can bring McCowan on for half an hour. I realise that might not be the case. It might be a really close game between Celtic and Aberdeen. That's what it's looking like anyway, because the two teams are on perfect points totals after 8 games respectively. So, yeah, regardless of who plays in that midfield, I expect them to do the job on Saturday. But, having this debate between Bernardo, Engels, Hatate, it's only good for the team. It's not as if it will cause infighting between the midfielders. It will just cause them to bring out the best in each other. And the fact is, they'll have pressure on themselves, because if they don't play well, then they'll be out the team for the next game. They're playing for European spots as well against Atalanta. You've got that game on the Wednesday, so that's something to look forward to for those players. And if they can put in a good performance against Aberdeen, they put themselves right in pole position to start in the Champions League, because that's what they want to do. That's why a lot of these players are at Celtic, to play in the Champions League for that exposure against the best teams in the world. So it's a really good position to be in at the moment. It's really the only area where I think there's any sort of contention at the moment, because I think every other position, apart from maybe centre-back, and that's due to injuries, every other position at the moment picks itself. But I think it's quite healthy to have those changes, maybe one change a game, and just freshen it up every so often. I'm just really happy with the way the midfield is going at the moment, and long may it continue.
I was looking into the kind of injury situation as well, guys. We've got some comments in already asking about James Forrest, asking about Cameron Carter-Vickers. The truth with James Forrest is that unless you guys have heard anything else, we don't really know. With James Forrest, he pulled out of the Scotland squad, I think, before the Croatia game. I don't think he's even left. I don't think he even left Scotland. I think I read that he pulled out while the team were still training in Scotland and headed back to Glasgow. I could be wrong there, but it doesn't really matter, to be honest. He has some sort of issue, clearly, but you hope that it's nothing too serious. We'll find out on Friday from the manager. Cameron Carter-Vickers not away on international duty with USA. The comments from Rodgers before the international break were that he would be back in training during the break, and that he would get in a good week before Aberdeen. That was the quote, a good week. So if you take those words and assume that there's been no setbacks for Carter-Vickers, and he's had a good week plus training ahead of this one. You would think he would start on Saturday, probably next to Liam Scales.
Yeah, we'll find out on Friday, won't we? The manager will update everybody on the injury situation on Thursday or Friday whenever Celtic do their pre-match press conference before Aberdeen. So yeah, and it's the manager's call. My thoughts are that Cameron Carter-Vickers, as I said yesterday, has to be 100%. I just don't think you can risk him in a game of this importance. So, but that's why the manager gets paid the big money that he does at the club to make these calls. And I've always said the manager watches everything in training. He bases a lot of his decisions on that's why he refers to a good week. He's talking about a good week in training. And Celtic have had a lot of those players have had a couple of weeks now to get themselves in shape and fit for the Aberdeen game. So you best believe that the team that the manager picks and turns out on Saturday is the one that's impressed him in training over that good week that he talks about. And so that may well be the likes of, as you say, Hatate coming back in. And, so I trust him implicitly on this, and I trust the fact that whatever starting 11 he picks, whether that be Hatate, Bernardo or McCowan in the Celtic midfield, he'll have given them the information and he'll loaded them with enough knowledge and enough nous that they will get a result against Aberdeen. Celtic have an uncanny knack of turning up in these fixtures. Just when you think somebody's going to challenge them, and they are good at slapping opposition down, challengers down, and the manager's adept at it. So, yeah, that's what I talk about when I talk about elite level stuff. It's not just getting results, it's about how you motivate players for games like this that are coming up, and all sorts of tweaks and stuff that you do with the team, your personnel, how you prepare a team. That's when I talk about Brendan Rodgers comes into his own. These are the kind of fixtures and matches that float the manager's boat, get his real juices flowing, and he'll have came up with a plan and a personnel to unlock Aberdeen.
Yeah, he said he'd watched a fair bit of Aberdeen over the international break and was quite impressed with them. Just quickly before we go on to Brendan Rodgers, left back, are we thinking it's going to be Vai starting the game? Because I think Greg Taylor, again, that's something we'll find out. I think the chat was from the manager prior to international break that Taylor may not be back for this one, but wouldn't be far away.
It was a wait and see, wasn't it, with Greg Taylor about his injury? So even then, if Bailly's had a full week's training, week and a half training, he would have got a couple of days off probably over the international break. But if he's been training, then I want him to be starting. This is his big opportunity to really have a good run in the team and really get some momentum going in his Celtic career. It's great that he's had these games to play in. It's good that he went away with the team to Sligo Rovers as well. That's a positive step for him. Now I think he's ready for the Aberdeen challenge. And you're starting to see wee things in his game that are quite impressive, and the reason why Celtic have brought him in to continue his development, because there's definitely a player there that I've been impressed with the way that he runs with the ball, his athleticism. His crossing can be a wee bit hit and miss, but I guess he's still trying to find his range at Celtic. Once he does, then he'll be totally fine. But I was really impressed with him, particularly in the second half against Ross County. And if Taylor's not fit, then I've got no worries about putting Alex Bailly into that team. And that's what he's there for. He's here for game time, because he wouldn't be getting that at Barcelona. So, if his quality's there, then he will break into the first team, because if he's sitting on the bench at Barcelona, then he can't be a bad player, that's for sure, because they're having a really good season at the moment, and if he was getting near the bench, then there must be a player there.
A few people asking about the game being on Celtic TV for overseas fans. I've not heard anything to say it wouldn't be. They show all the home games, so I'm sure it will be shown. Just a few comments before we go on to Brendan Rodgers. Andrew saying Taylor, Maida, Hatate combination on the left is our strongest. Again, we'll have to wait and see what the situation is with Taylor. Marky looking or hoping for a good challenge from Aberdeen. Really want them having a go at our defence, prep them properly for the Champions League game versus Atalanta. Yeah, it'll be a good test for us ahead of that European game. And Rebel wondering if McGregor was injured What would our midfield be if Callum McGregor was injured? Just out of interest, would it be Engels deeper, and then Bernardo Hatate, Bernardo McCowan, something like that?
I think
Bernardo deeper.
normally, actually, because I think McCowan could step into that role.
I think you need that Scottish contingent in that midfield somewhere, and it's something that stats can't quantify or can't explain, but you just need that Scottish player in there as well. I think having McGregor in there is brilliant because he's the mouthpiece for the team. I think Luke McCowan can be a great deputy for him if there was to be an injury. Thankfully, that the chances of McGregor getting an injury are lessened now due to the fact that he's not away playing international football. He can use this time to recharge his batteries. And it's clearly working for him. Look at his performances he's put in. Out with the Borussia Dortmund game, I think there's an argument to be made that McGregor's been Celtic's best player in every single game he's played this season. He's been that good. There's always an argument. He's always a candidate for man of the match. So it's clear that it was a good decision for him to give up the international football, even though I do think he'd be starting most games for Scotland still, because their midfield wasn't up to much last night. I think when you look at Kenny McLean, I'm like, that's a downgrade on Callum McGregor. It's not a like-for-like swap. McGregor's a far better player than Kenny McLean. I think they're probably waiting for Lewis Ferguson to come back and be fully fit, or maybe even Lennon Miller to make that jump from under 21s to senior football. But that's for the future, and McGregor's just doing it for Celtic, so I don't think anyone can really complain at this moment in time.
What was the chat from Brendan Rodgers then yesterday? I had a kind of brief run through the part that they don't put behind the paywall, so I got the stuff on Aberdeen, and then I actually read some of the other stuff. I think you guys stuck some of his quotes up on various things. Nothing major, was it? He was speaking a bit about the break, and he said some of the players got a bit of breathing space to rest and recharge for the next batch of games. That was after the Sligo game. So that's why we've seen Kyogo going away up to Iona, I think, and Lewis Palmer was at Hampden last night. I know that's not technically time off, but it was a strange one, I thought. But yeah, they've been given some time off, Tony.
As I said during the week, I think this international break came at a good time for Celtic because the performances were tapering off. And sometimes, the first international break came at a time when Celtic were firing on all cylinders and everybody was saying, it's disrupted everything, so it can have those kind of effects. It can be good and bad, but I think this one was a good time for Celtic to have the break, and you're just hoping that once everybody's back and everybody's declared fit, most players are declared fit, that they can hit the ground running again. And I think the manager will have enjoyed having that extra time with some of the players and prep the ones that are playing in this game. Say, right, you're in the starting 11, because those guys will know by now and just get themselves up for it and ready, and then you can come out the blocks fast again. So I think the international break would probably be more beneficial to Celtic because of that time that he's had, because of be able to get players like Cameron Carter-Vickers out on the grass, as the manager always likes that phrase. He's on the grass, so I'm sure he'll say that on Thursday or Friday whenever Celtic do their press conference before, so he'll let you know. So I'm quite satisfied about that. The international breaks are a two-way thing, aren't they? But I think this one came along at a decent time for Celtic because the last couple of performances domestically weren't the best. So you're just hoping that chance to recuperate and recharge serves them well, and I think it will. Full house Celtic Park, Saturday 3:00. As I said on Monday, a real throwback to a traditional Saturday of football, which everybody remembers and everybody relishes, and they will relish it, and they'll think back to the time. There were lots of people who do the rituals that they did years ago. Well, I'm hoping they do. Because of the timing, and it's just ripe for something good to happen. There's just a real sense of occasion about it, isn't there?
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of those games, and you don't get them too often now. Certainly for Saturday 3 p.m. games, going to be a total sellout, and I think everyone's going to be in their seat. you would certainly hope for a game like this. And I'll be honest, at Celtic Park, there's a lot of games they say are sellouts and they aren't actually sellouts. But I think Saturday's going to be one of those ones when, especially coming in off the international break, if we are anything to go by, people and the chat is anything to go by, people are absolutely choking to see Celtic back in action. And I think Saturday's going to be a really big game and a real test for the team as well. Potentially our biggest test we've had domestically so far this season. Falkirk are so far, so we'll see what Aberdeen have to offer us.
Yeah, Falkirk was the last home game, wasn't it?
Right, that's a reason for it to be sold
think about how long it's been. Everything is going for Celtic here and the supporters for it to be a full house. The opposition, the way the opposition started the season, the fact of how long it's been since the home game. It was Falkirk in the League Cup. That was nearly a month ago, if not a month ago. It's been a long time since Celtic played at home. They had that stretch of away games and then the international break. The international break's another factor because a lot of people turn off the international football. There was another comment that Rodgers made, and he was talking about footballers playing for 12 months. It's going to be very soon. It's going to be a 12-month sort of job playing football. I've got to say I agree with all of the players that are outcrying the schedule at the moment. There's too many games to fulfill at this moment in time, and you're seeing that with the amount of ACL injuries that are happening or muscle injuries all around football. I just feel like there's too much stress on the players. I know people will say or they'll retort that they're getting paid X amount of money a week, they need to play X amount of games, etc. But I think in order to keep up the standard or the good standard of football, there needs to be less games because there's too much strain on bodies to play 50, 60 games a season. I remember when Callum McGregor was getting praised for playing 60 games a season. It's not. You can't keep that up for 5, 6, 7 years because you'll get the injuries on the back end of that. I just think that it's something that football and the authorities need to have a look at because I think there's too much football, too many games being played, too many international tournaments being played, and you're starting to see the downgrade in football because of that, and you're seeing a lot of injuries because of that as well. So I agree with what Brendan Rodgers was saying. He was kind of saying it in a negative tone that it's a 12-month game now, but I think there needs to be adequate breaks because it's like that in other sports. Other sports get plenty of time off. You look at American football, for example, the Super Bowl's in January, February time, and it isn't on until August. So you get a big space in between, and that's how they keep the level up. I know it's a far more physical game than football because there's actual contact between the players, and that's sort of part of the game, part and parcel of the game. But having a bigger break in between, I think, would be beneficial. There's a lot of football, is basically what I'm trying to say, and I think the players have got to be safeguarded. I do feel for the players and the amount of football that they are playing.
But the answer to these meaningless international games was to make it more competitive, so bring in more international games with this UEFA Nations League.
Also, this Club World Cup they're doing next summer, that fair enough probably won't affect us, but that seems like a ridiculous shout to have.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Hamish, it's you know what it is, and it's not dictated to by clubs. It's dictated to by money and television, isn't it? Remember the outcry when Man U pulled out the FA Cup to go and compete in the FIFA World Club Cup, wasn't it? Or FIFA World Championships. Man U pulled out the FA Cup, and there was all sorts of outcry about that. So I just, they say the answer is less football, but they just keep lumping more football on the calendar, don't they? And
I'll be honest, I don't want less football. I'll be honest, selfishly. I mean, I'm not saying this is the right thing, but as a fan, I want as much football as I can. I mean, I've spent the last 2 weeks moaning about no football. I think having a summer free of football is right. I think that's where they can change things. But I mean, you look at Celtic, and you're talking about generally, Ryan, and that's obviously a fair point. I think in terms of Celtic, our games have probably actually gone down over the past few years because we don't have the 4 rounds of qualifying. That might change next season, and I think we'll see. I don't know how many rounds we have next season, but I remember a few years ago when we had the 4 qualifiers, and there was one season we played in all 4. I think maybe one of them was Europa League, but we certainly had 4 qualifiers, and then we had 6 group matches in the Europa League, and then we had a knockout game in the Europa League, and that was, I think off the top of my head, that's 16 European matches plus 38 in the league plus 5 and 4 in the 2 cups. Like that, it's crazy amount. So I want more football because I love watching football, but I think what I would change is the summer. I would have no football in the summer other than World Cup and Euros years. I would also, if you gave me a blank canvas, I'd put all the international stuff over one break rather than having 3 breaks in September, October, November. Have a month-long break. I know the thought of that's quite scary, but get all the international games in that month. Think of the momentum you would build up, and yet be a month of it without Celtic. But once you're finished that, you don't have 2 more interruptions. So I personally don't understand why they don't do that, because you think even of like travelling around the world and like take Real Hatate and Dies and Maida, for example, they wouldn't have to travel to Japan and back 3 times. They'd only have to do it once if you played them all in the space of a month. And as I say, I think you would get more into the international stuff if it was all closely condensed together rather than having what we have now. And the international breaks last ages, but equally you're just starting to get into the international football and they're over. So it's a weird kind of thing. So that's I know Henry McClarson saying I couldn't stand a month without Celtic. I know we manage in the summer though, don't we? So I would rather a month without Celtic than 2 weeks without Celtic, then another 2 weeks without Celtic the next month, then another 2 weeks. But it's just my thoughts.
You're starting to see. Sorry,
I think there's merit in that. On you go, Ryan.
Yeah.
And I'll talk up.
I think that's inevitable, that League Cup point.
You're starting to see teams now using Americanized terms for players as well, such as the one that gets used a lot, and it gets used in basketball for players that want to avoid injuries, load management, and they sit out in certain games because there's a bigger chance. It gets Kawhi Leonard that sits out for the Clippers. I know this is to do with basketball, totally unrelated to football.
They play every few days, don't they?
Yeah, and it's strenuous basketball as well because it's back to front. You need to defend and attack, but you're starting to see that in Europe as well now. You look at Chelsea's Conference League squad, they actually omitted Cole Palmer because he plays too many games, and they're like, we've taken the decision not to play him in those games to give him that break. So that's now teams are now they're sort of taking a stand and not playing players in certain games. I think that's only going to increase as the schedule goes on and on. So I think Celtic, and I think Brendan Rodgers is quite right to stand up for these players and talk about the amount of football that they're playing. As long as they manage the team correctly. And this is why having a midfield that's got so much depth is good, because they can change it up without necessarily losing the strength in it by changing the personnel every 2-3 games. So that's a direct consequence. Having the 5 subs helps as well for Celtic, obviously. The fact is, it would have been... You look at the schedule now, having 3 subs just wouldn't suffice anymore. Yeah. Now that it's 5 subs, I think it's got to stay that way due to the amount of games that Celtic play. So I think that was a good rule as well that came into play during COVID, but it's obviously stayed. So yeah, I just hope the players are safeguarded from injuries, because there seems to be more and more injuries happening as the years go on. I would need to look at exact numbers, but that's certainly what it feels like at the moment in terms of muscle injuries.
And I think this is an inevitability, to be fair, because there is no European place now for the League Cup. And I'm not saying it's worthless, but all it stands for is the first leg of a domestic treble, isn't it, really? If that's the case, and you go on and achieve that feat. So I think lots of people are turned off by the early rounds of the League Cup, aren't they? And so I just feel that that's something that you could look at in terms of Celtic, and get the lighten the load in terms of football matches, especially at this time of the season. You don't need, I don't know how many games Celtic play. Usually they come in the last 32 phase, do they? Is that right? Or the last 16?
4 in the League Cup, 5 in the Scottish Cup if we win it or get to the final.
So but it's still a fair few games where you could rest players, or players could be rested for that time. Yeah. So I think there's an inevitability about the League Cup in terms of where Celtic go and in their future, and it might be that it becomes a competition. Remember, they used to field full strength teams for the Glasgow Cup, and then it became a kind of a lesser light teams of the B teams, and then it became a kind of an under 21s, and then it became like a youth cup. sort of thing. I think the League Cup could end up going that way for Celtic. I'm not saying it would go that way for the rest of the teams, but certainly for Celtic, I think it's something that has to be looked at.
Because if UEFA got obviously expanded their competitions, the Champions League, 8 matches now, as we know, and I don't know if you remember, guys, but they were actually pushing for 10, and 10 was actually the original agreement, and then I think due to backlash from players or clubs or unions representing players, it was brought down to 8. But they're going to come again in a few years when the next Champions League cycle comes up. If this is a success, which I think it is going to be, and it's going to be 10 games, European football's going to be there's going to be more of it. So you're going to need to cut games somewhere. So the League Cup for me would be the one.
What we're witnessing just now in the Champions League is a Super League by stealth.
Yeah. Which is good for Celtic. It's good.
Yeah, I would love to play 10 games in the Champions League.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind
give me
that.
12, give me 14.
Yeah, but then something has to give. So in my case, I would say the League Cup has to give then.
Yeah,
and let Celtic play at that level of competition, 10, 12 games, whatever it is. But we are watching leagues within this league, and to me, it's a Super League by stealth, and they will get their way, UEFA, and they'll get their UEFA Super League eventually. And so you want to try and be a part of that, or as much in the thick of that as possible.
I think they've already got it. I think this is the UEFA sponsored Super League. This is the Super League that they wanted. It's not the Super League that the clubs wanted. But this is the best version of it that UEFA can get without the other teams going away and creating their own. That was the backlash back in 2021 when those teams for about 2 days decided they were going to create their own league before the backlash from the rest of European football, including some of the bigger teams in Europe, totally lambasting these teams for even thinking of doing such a thing. Then a couple of years later, UEFA have basically made their own Super League where all the big teams play against each other, big teams play against the smaller teams. So they do have their own UEFA-sponsored Super League, but it's maybe not the ones that the big teams wanted.
It's a precursor to what's coming, isn't it? Because even now you're looking at that league, and there's league within that league, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
There's top 8 who you could pick as a Champions League winner. Then there's 8 below them that are just not quite at that level. Then there's that 8 which Celtic are trying to scrap to get into the top 24, and then there's the ones that are just in there but just not able to compete in the first 3 rungs of that ladder. So they've got what they've wanted, basically, and then they'll just keep refining it and tuning it up as we go along.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. We got a comment from SPB just pointing out that basically football isn't the only sport that's having this debate. Big debate in tennis at the moment about how much they're playing. And I just think generally in sport and in life at the moment, matches are getting longer in virtually every sport. And they're getting more often. The governing bodies, whatever, want to get as much money out of sport as they can. So, yep, it's going to be interesting to see where things head. I think it's going to certainly be a big talking point over the coming years. Anything else today, guys? That was a good wee topic, Brian, to get us on to.
Yeah, it certainly was, and I like going. As much as I enjoy talking about Celtic, everybody knows how much I like talking about the bigger picture as well, and talking about football in general, because Celtic are a big part of that, of the bigger picture too. They've got to be one of the teams that shape the future of football. They've got to be one of the pioneers and be at the main table with all the rest of the big teams. Celtic are a big player in Europe, maybe not on the park, but they're a historic club, and they should be in these conversations, directly in these conversations, because they do play a lot of games, 50, 60 games a season, and that does have its wear and tear, which, for some players and these international breaks, they can be so beneficial, as Brendan Rodgers said, because they're completely turning off and switching off and recharging the batteries ahead of coming back and playing for Celtic. Just glad that the international break's over and we can focus on this Aberdeen game. I know we've been talking about it, but I think that brings excitement about it as well, the fact that we've been talking about it for so long, because when Saturday comes, you'll know that feeling. You'll wake up and it'll be like, oh, this is a big game that Celtic are playing. Celtic are playing against the team that have matched them this season, result for result. They're in the same leg of the League Cup as well. The two teams are playing each other in the semi-finals. They've also matched them in terms of wins as well. Totally mirrored starts to the season. Something's got to give on Saturday, and we'll see what happens between the two sides. It's an exciting time.
Are Celtic playing Aberdeen on Saturday? I didn't know that. That's news to me.
We've not mentioned it at all over the last week, have we? And we'll be doing it some more tomorrow as well. I'm sure there'll be, now that the international stuff's over, things will start to happen, and we'll have Brendan Rodgers speaking, etc. Okay, we'll leave it there for now, guys. Thank you once again. Thanks everyone for watching, commenting. Still looking for subscribers. Did we make it to 12,000? This is a big moment for everyone. This is where
not yet, from what I can. Please, we're at 11,962, so we are 38. Guys, Maeda, 38 subscribers away from reaching that 12,000 total. Please, if you don't already subscribe to us, please press that subscribe button. And if you want to support us just that little bit more, then you can join our YouTube members channel for just £2.99 a month. You'll receive early video access, priority comments, and exclusive members chat function. Press the subscribe button, and if you want to support us that little bit more, press the join button if you're on desktop. And thank you to everyone that's done so far. We really do appreciate it.
Great stuff. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Tony. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll catch up with you this time tomorrow.